The massive Imperial vessel Dominion dropped out of hyperspace with a flash of blue light. It dwarfed the small human outpost floating peacefully at the edge of settled space. Captain James Walker stood at the viewport of Outpost Sentinel, watching the alien ship approach. His weathered face showed no fear, only weary recognition. "They're hailing us," said Officer Tom Reed, his fingers hovering over the communications panel. Walker nodded. "Put them through." The screen flickered to life, revealing a tall, gray-skinned being with 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern. Ornate armor covered its chest, adorned with symbols of rank and conquest. "I am Admiral Vex of the Galactic Imperial Fleet," the alien announced in perfectly translated English. "Your primitive outpost now stands in Imperial territory. You will surrender immediately and prepare for integration into our glorious empire." Walker crossed his arms. "Admiral, we have no quarrel with your empire. We are merely explorers and traders. Perhaps we could discuss." "There is nothing to discuss," Vex interrupted. "Our empire spans 3,000 star systems. We have peacefully absorbed over 500 species into our collective. Those who resisted were educated. Your species will be no different." Walker's expression darkened. "Admiral, I don't think you understand what you're dealing with. Humans aren't like other species you've encountered." "All species say this," Vex replied with a dismissive wave. "All believe they are special." "We don't claim to be special," Walker said quietly. "Just different. Our history is unique among spacefaring races. We mastered war long before we reached the stars." The Imperial commander's upper eyes narrowed. "War is inefficient. The Empire brings order." "You've never fought humans before, have you?" Walker asked. "Your species has been observed for some time. Your technology is primitive, your military force is small. Your resistance would be pointless." Walker smiled grimly. "Admiral, throughout our entire history, humans have never stopped fighting each other. Not for a single year. We've had thousands of years to perfect the art of war. While other species were learning to work together, we were learning how to kill each other more efficiently." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Vex's face. "When we finally united as a species," Walker continued, "it wasn't through peaceful enlightenment. It was because we needed to stand together against something worse than ourselves. We don't want conflict with your empire, but if you force this issue, you should know what you're starting." Admiral Vex regained his composure. "Your primitive weapons cannot harm our ships. Your outposts will fall within days. The Empire has never lost a war." "That's just it, Admiral," Walker said softly. "You've never had one. Not a real one. Not with us." The alien commander's voice hardened. "You have one planetary cycle to prepare for integration. Resistance will be met with appropriate force." Walker leaned forward, his voice dropping to just above a whisper. "Admiral Vex of the Galactic Empire, I am officially warning you, on behalf of all humanity. Run." The communication cut off abruptly. Walker turned to his crew, their faces a mix of fear and determination. "Send the alert to Earth," he ordered. "Tell them exactly what happened here." "Do you think they'll listen?" asked Reed. Walker shook his head. "No, empires never do. That's why they fall." Outside the viewport, more Imperial ships began appearing, their massive forms blocking out the stars. "What do we do now, Captain?" a young officer asked. Walker's eyes never left the gathering fleet. "We show them why they should have taken our warning seriously." As the Imperial ships moved into attack formation, Walker activated the outpost's hidden defenses, weapons far more advanced than the Empire had believed possible. They had expected primitive resistance. They would encounter something else entirely. The first shots of the war that would reshape the galaxy were about to be fired. The Grand Hall of Earth's United Defense Council fell silent as Intelligence Officer Tom Miller stepped up to the podium. Behind him, a massive holographic display showed the advancing Imperial fleet, 37 warships moving in perfect formation toward the outer colonies. "Ladies and gentlemen," Miller began, his voice echoing through the chamber. 3 days ago, the Galactic Empire made first official contact with humans at Outpost Sentinel. They demanded surrender. Captain Walker refused. The room remained quiet. These weren't politicians or bureaucrats. These were military leaders from every human world, people who understood what was coming. Sentinel was destroyed. Miller continued, but not before inflicting significant damage on Imperial forces and transmitting complete scans of their technology. He touched a control, and technical schematics filled the display. Their weapons are advanced, but not unbeatable. Their shields have patterns, weaknesses. Admiral Gloria West, commander of Earth's Space Forces, leaned forward. "How much time do we have?" 6 days until they reach the mining colony at Proxima Centauri, Miller replied. Their commander, Admiral Vex, believes this will be a simple pacification operation. A quiet, deadly chuckle spread through the room. It wasn't amusement. It was recognition. Every person present knew what happened when someone underestimated humanity. "What about the diplomatic approach?" asked General Park. At the back of the chamber, Dr. Lisa Reed stood up. The former military historian had been called in specifically for this crisis. "I've spent the last 48 hours with the Imperial diplomats. They don't understand us at all." She walked to the front, each step measured and deliberate. The Empire has never known true war. Their conquests have been against peaceful species who surrendered rather than fight. They've never faced an enemy who had been fighting itself for thousands of years before reaching space. Reed activated her own display, showing images from Earth's bloody history, ancient battles, world wars, modern conflicts. I showed them this. I explained how humans developed warfare as an art form, how even our sports and games are based on combat, how we prepare for wars that haven't even started yet. What was their reaction? Admiral West asked. "They didn't believe me," Reed said simply. "They think it's propaganda or exaggeration. The concept of a species that advanced technologically while constantly at war is foreign to them. They believe advanced civilizations naturally outgrow conflict." Miller nodded grimly. "This works to our advantage. They expect token resistance followed by surrender. They don't know we've been waiting for something like this." The room grew colder as Admiral West stood up. "Initiate Operation Sleeping Giant. Activate all hidden military installations. Deploy the Shadow Fleet." A junior officer's eyes widened. "All of it, Admiral." "All of it," West confirmed. "And send a message to the colonial defenses at Proxima. Tell them to make it look good." "Make what look good, ma'am?" West's smile was thin and dangerous. "The trap, Lieutenant. Make it look like we're surprised and overwhelmed, right until the moment we're not." Dr. Reed approached West after the meeting adjourned. "The Empire's diplomats asked me why humans seemed so calm about impending conquest. They expected panic." West looked out the window at the sprawling military complex below, where ships and weapons that had been hidden for decades were now being prepared for war. "What did you tell them?" the Admiral asked. "I told them that throughout our history, humans have been at their most dangerous when they appear calm," Reed replied. "I told them to study our history more carefully." They laughed. West's eyes hardened. They won't be laughing long. In space, the Imperial fleet moved steadily onward, unaware that they weren't advancing toward a simple conquest. They were marching into the arena of the galaxy's most experienced warriors. And humanity was ready. The mining colony of New Hope on Proxima Centauri appeared defenseless as Imperial dropships entered the atmosphere. From orbit, Admiral Vex observed with satisfaction. The human settlement, a collection of domed buildings and industrial structures carved into a mountainside, showed no signs of military presence. "No resistance detected," Admiral reported his second-in-command. "Scans show only mining equipment and civilian life forms." "As expected," Vex replied. "Begin the landing sequence. Commander Drell will lead the ground forces." Commander Drell, a veteran of 12 successful planetary integrations, led 300 elite Imperial soldiers toward the colony. Their dropships landed in the central plaza, where a small group of humans waited, apparently to surrender. Commander Alex Foster stood at the front of the mining colony's reception committee, his face a mask of practiced fear. Behind him, 50 miners shuffled nervously, exactly as they had rehearsed. The Imperial soldiers deployed with mechanical precision, weapons ready but not firing. "I am Commander Drell of the Galactic Empire," announced the lead alien. "This colony is now under Imperial control. Surrender your administrative authority." Foster stepped forward, hands raised. "We're just miners. We don't want trouble." Drell gestured toward the colony buildings. "My soldiers will secure your facilities. Cooperate, and no one will be harmed." "Of course," Foster said, his voice trembling perfectly. "But I should warn you about the deep tunnels. They're unstable." Drell ignored the warning. "Secure the settlement," he ordered his troops. "First Division, take the main complex. Second, the processing facilities. Third, the residential areas." As the Imperial soldiers spread out across the colony, Foster glanced at his watch. 3 minutes until the trap would spring. Inside the mountain, the miners who had supposedly fled were taking positions. These weren't civilians, but Special Forces soldiers, trained for exactly this scenario. They moved through hidden passages, bypassing the Imperial soldiers who were methodically securing empty rooms. Foster followed Drell into the main control center. "Our operation is quite simple," he explained, pointing to various displays. "We mine rare minerals from the deep shafts and—" A sudden rumble shook the complex. Drell spun around. What was that? Foster's demeanor changed instantly. That would be the main shaft collapsing. His voice was no longer frightened, but coldly professional. "Right on schedule." Across the colony, carefully placed explosives detonated, not to damage the settlement, but to trigger a chain reaction in the mining tunnels. Imperial soldiers found themselves cut off, separated, and suddenly facing heavily armed humans emerging from hidden compartments. The mining equipment, industrial drills, cutting lasers, and heavy loaders, had been modified into devastating weapons. What the Empire had dismissed as primitive tools became instruments of precise destruction. In the control center, Foster locked the doors, trapping Drell and his officers. "I tried to warn you about those tunnels," he said, drawing a concealed weapon. "This is impossible." Drell sputtered as the sounds of battle echoed through the complex. "You have no military here." Foster laughed. "We're humans. We're all military." He activated the communication system. "Status report. Sections 1 through 4 secured," came the reply. "Enemy forces contained. 70% neutralized." Drell stared in disbelief. "How? You were supposed to be helpless miners." "That's your first lesson about humans," Foster said. "We're never what we seem." He pointed to the surveillance feeds showing Imperial soldiers being systematically eliminated. "Your people fight like they've never faced real resistance before. Ours fight like they've been doing it forever." In orbit, Admiral Vex watched in horror as communications with his ground forces went dark. The reports he'd received before losing contact described tactics he'd never encountered: brutal, efficient, and utterly without mercy. "Recall all remaining dropships," he ordered. "Prepare a full report for High Command." As the Imperial ships retreated, Foster transmitted a complete analysis of their weapons, tactics, and weaknesses back to Earth. Attached was a simple message: "They bleed. We can kill them." The battle for New Hope was over in less than an hour. The Empire had just received its first lesson in human warfare, and it had failed the test. Admiral Marcus Gray stood on the bridge of the HMS Retribution, watching as hundreds of warships emerged from secret orbital docks hidden throughout Earth's solar system. Ships that officially didn't exist. Ships built for a day humanity had always known would come. "Status report," Gray commanded, his weathered face illuminated by the tactical displays. "Battle Group Alpha is fully deployed," Admiral reported Commander Ellis. Battle groups Beta through Delta are at 90% readiness. The stealth frigates are already in position near the Imperial fleet's expected route. Gray nodded. For decades, humanity had constructed this shadow fleet in secret while presenting a peaceful face to the galaxy. Now the masks were coming off. "Begin Operation Hornet's Nest," he ordered. Throughout human space, military installations activated. Asteroid bases that appeared to be mining operations revealed gun batteries. Seemingly civilian space stations transformed as weapon systems came online. Merchant vessels shed their outer hulls, revealing warships beneath. On the tactical display, the Imperial fleet appeared as a red mass moving confidently toward Earth. They had reinforced after the Proxima Centauri disaster, bringing 200 warships, a force they believed would overwhelm any resistance. "They still don't understand," Ellis said, watching the Imperial formation. "Look at them. Perfect rows, standard tactics. They're fighting by the book." "Our advantage," Gray replied. "They have a book. We have a library." The Admiral touched a control, bringing up Earth's military history database. "We've been fighting wars for thousands of years. Naval battles, guerrilla warfare, psychological operations. We've tried every possible strategy against ourselves." He selected a battle plan from humanity's bloody past. "Send this to all commanders. Ancient Earth, 480 BCE. The Battle of Salamis." Ellis raised an eyebrow. "Naval tactics from 25 centuries ago. Adapted for space, Commander. The principle remains sound. Lure a superior force into confined space where their numbers become a liability." The human fleet dispersed, seemingly retreating in disarray. Small attack vessels darted toward the Imperial formation, fired, and withdrew before the Empire could respond effectively. Admiral Vex watched from his flagship as the human forces scattered. "They run," he announced to his command staff. "Press forward. Their homeworld will fall before the day is done." His tactical officer looked uncertain. "Admiral, their retreat pattern seems deliberate. They seek to delay the inevitable." Vex dismissed. "Follow and destroy any vessel in range." The Imperial fleet pursued the fleeing human ships into an asteroid field that Earth's navigational beacons had marked as dangerous. The massive Imperial dreadnought slowed, trying to maneuver through the narrow passages between the asteroids. And then the trap closed. Hidden human ships powered up throughout the asteroid field. The retreating vessels suddenly turned and attacked. The Imperial fleet found itself surrounded, confined, and under fire from all directions. "They can't bring their full firepower to bear," Ellis observed as the battle unfolded, just as the Persians couldn't at Salamis. Gray watched impassively. Now Phase 2, the psychological warfare. Human ships began broadcasting on all Imperial frequencies, not threats or demands, but something far worse, the sounds of human warfare throughout history. Battle cries, war drums, the roar of ancient armies, all remixed into a cacophony designed to instill primal fear. Alongside the sounds came images, humans fighting humans across the millennia, displaying a brutality and dedication to warfare that horrified the Imperial troops, who had never witnessed such violence. In the chaos, smaller human vessels darted between Imperial ships, attaching devices to their hulls. Not explosives, but targeted EMP weapons that shut down sections of the larger vessels, crippling them systematically. "Imperial flagship is attempting to rally their forces," Ellis reported. "Target their command vessel," Gray ordered. "All batteries, fire." The Retribution's main guns fired in unison, joined by a dozen other capital ships. The Imperial flagship's shields held for precisely 3 seconds before collapsing. As the Imperial command vessel broke apart, Gray opened a channel to all human forces. "This is just the beginning," he said quietly. "Now we take the fight to them." Across the stars, humanity's war machine was fully awakened, and it was hungry. Elder Counselor Drav moved slowly through the Imperial archives, his 4 eyes scanning the data streams that surrounded him. The ancient alien had served the Empire for 2 centuries, advising emperors and guiding policy. Now he faced the greatest challenge of his long career. The holographic display before him showed the devastation of the Imperial Third Fleet, ships broken and burning in the void. The humans had not simply defeated them, they had systematically dismantled one of the finest fighting forces in the galaxy. "This cannot be," whispered High Commander Zarth, who stood beside him. "No species has ever inflicted such losses on Imperial forces, because we have never faced a species like the humans," Drav replied, his voice grave. He gestured, and the display changed to show historical records of human conflicts. "For the past week, I have studied their history. What I found disturbs me greatly." The images shifted, showing ancient humans fighting with primitive weapons, then modern wars with increasingly destructive technology. Unlike every other known sentient species, humans did not unite as they advanced. Drav explained. They remained divided, fighting constantly among themselves. While we evolved past warfare, they perfected it. Zarth's expression darkened. "How did our intelligence miss this?" "Because we looked for the wrong signs," Drav said. "We measured their weapons, counted their ships. We did not understand their nature." He brought up footage from captured human data cores, military training exercises, battle simulations, even entertainment programs depicting warfare. "Look at this," Drav pointed. "Their young play games simulating combat. Their entertainment glorifies war. They maintain military forces even in times of peace. They never stopped preparing." The door to the archives slid open, and Emperor Krell entered. The ruler of 1,000 worlds looked shaken, his usual confidence absent. "Tell me you have found a solution, Elder Drav," the Emperor demanded. Drav bowed slightly. "I have found understanding, Your Majesty. Solution may be more difficult." He activated another display, showing reports from supposedly conquered human colonies. "These outposts we claim to have pacified. They are not under our control," Drav explained. The humans appeared to surrender, then formed resistance movements. "Our garrisons report constant attacks, sabotage, disappearing soldiers." "Guerrilla warfare," Zarth muttered. "Another concept alien to us. Our rigid command structure is failing against their decentralized approach," Drav continued. "Human commanders make decisions independently, adapt quickly. Our forces wait for orders while humans exploit the delay." The Emperor paced, his ceremonial armor gleaming in the archive's dim light. "We have never lost a war, Elder Drav. We cannot start now." "With respect, Your Majesty, we have never fought a war," Drav replied quietly. "We have conducted pacification operations against species that had no concept of organized violence. The humans are different." He pulled up a final display, intercepted human military communications, showing their next planned offensive. "They are not merely defending," Drav warned. "They are preparing to attack Imperial core worlds. Their strategy suggests they have studied our defensive capabilities for years before we even met them." "Impossible," Zarth protested. "They couldn't have known." "They didn't need to know us specifically," Drav interrupted. "They prepared for any potential threat. It's what they do. It's who they are." Emperor Krell's voice dropped to a whisper. "What are you suggesting, Elder?" "The Empire has 2 choices," Drav said solemnly. "Continue this conflict and face unprecedented losses, or attempt to negotiate with the humans from a position of mutual respect." Zarth straightened, offended. "Negotiate? With primitives who have destroyed 3 Imperial fleets in 2 weeks, Drav finished for him. "Primitives who develop new countermeasures against our technology faster than we can deploy it." A junior officer rushed into the archives, bowing hastily. "Your Majesty, urgent news from the outer systems. The humans, they've begun something they call a counter-offensive." On the main display, alerts flashed as human warships appeared near Imperial strongholds, not just military targets, but supply lines, communication relays, and manufacturing centers. They're not fighting our military, Drav realized aloud. They're fighting our empire itself. The Emperor stared at the spreading reports of human attacks, his face grim. What kind of species are they? One that warned us to run, Drav answered softly. And we did not listen. Emperor Krell stood before the massive viewport of his command ship, watching as the Imperial Grand Fleet assembled. 1,000 warships, the largest fighting force ever gathered under the Imperial banner, formed a perfect geometric pattern against the backdrop of stars. The fleet is ready, Your Majesty, High Commander Zarth announced. Operation Final Sword will commence on your command. Krell nodded. After 3 months of humiliating defeats, the Empire would end this human problem once and for all. No more clever tactics or adaptive strategies, just overwhelming force. Begin the operation, the Emperor commanded. Deep in human territory, Admiral Gray received the alert from the long-range sensor network. He sat alone in his quarters aboard the Retribution, studying the tactical display with a cup of coffee in hand. Right on schedule, he murmured, setting down his cup. He opened a channel to all human forces. The enemy has committed their main fleet. Initiate Operation Thermopylae. Across human space, ships began moving into position, not to defend Earth, but to allow the Imperial fleet through. Commander Ellis entered Gray's quarters, confused by the orders being transmitted. Admiral, we're opening a corridor straight to Earth. The defense grid is powering down. Gray nodded. History's greatest trap is the one the enemy walks into willingly. But sir, they outnumber us 5-1. Numbers, Gray said, standing up, have never been the deciding factor in human warfare. Position, psychology, and purpose are what matter. He pointed to a star map showing Earth's solar system. We've prepared this battlefield for months. Now we bring them exactly where we want them. The Imperial Grand Fleet moved unopposed through human space, their sensors detecting retreating human vessels, but no organized resistance. They flee before our might, Zarth proclaimed on the Emperor's bridge. Victory is assured. Elder Counselor Drav, who had insisted on accompanying the fleet, looked troubled. This is too easy. The humans have demonstrated cunning in every engagement. Why would they suddenly abandon strategy? Because they recognize defeat, the Emperor replied. Not even humans can stand against our full strength. 3 days later, the Imperial fleet entered Earth's solar system. Their sensors showed minimal defenses around the human homeworld. Victory seemed certain. Then everything changed. Human ships emerged from behind moons and asteroids, from within giant atmospheres, and from stealth fields that Imperial sensors couldn't penetrate. Not in a disorganized rush, but in perfect coordination. Multiple contacts, shouted an Imperial sensor officer. They're everywhere. On the Retribution, Admiral Gray gave the order. All ships, execute Battle Plan Manila. The human fleet split into 3 distinct formations. One harassed the Imperial rear guard, cutting off retreat. Another struck at the flanks, forcing the Imperial ships closer together. The third held position, waiting. They're using old Earth naval tactics, Gray explained to his officers. The Spanish Armada, 1588, force a powerful enemy into a disadvantageous position, then exploit their inability to maneuver. As the Imperial fleet condensed, trying to bring their superior numbers to bear, the trap was sprung. From Earth's surface, massive rail guns, hidden underground until this moment, opened fire. Kinetic projectiles traveling at near-relativistic speeds tore through the packed Imperial formation. Simultaneously, hundreds of small, unmanned vessels accelerated toward the Imperial fleet. Not missiles, but EMP platforms designed to disable rather than destroy. This is impossible, Emperor Krell shouted as systems throughout his flagship failed. How could they coordinate such an attack? Drav watched in horrified fascination. They're not trying to destroy us, he realized. They're disabling our ships systematically. Gray's voice echoed through every Imperial communication device, still functioning. Attention Imperial forces. Your fleet is disabled. Your weapons are offline. Your engines are dead. Look around you. Imperial commanders watched as human ships surrounded them, weapons ready but not firing. We could destroy you, Gray continued, his voice calm. But unlike you, we understand war well enough to know when it should end. In the silence that followed, a single human shuttle approached the Emperor's crippled flagship. Your Majesty, Drav said quietly, I believe the humans wish to discuss terms. Emperor Krell, ruler of 1,000 worlds, had no choice but to listen. The greatest fleet in Imperial history hung powerless in space, defeated not by superior numbers or technology, but by the accumulated military wisdom of humanity's bloody history. The Imperial Palace on Zentrix Prime had never hosted a peace conference before. For millennia, the Empire had only known conquest and integration, never negotiation between equals. Yet today, human representatives walked the ancient halls as honored guests, not conquered subjects. Captain James Walker, commander of the destroyed outpost Sentinel where the conflict began, led the human delegation. His uniform was simple compared to the ornate dress of the imperial court, but he carried himself with quiet confidence that commanded respect. Emperor Krell sat upon the crystal throne, flanked by Elder Counselor Drav and military leaders. The Emperor's expression remained carefully neutral, masking the humiliation of defeat. The terms of our agreement are straightforward, Walker explained, activating a holographic display. The Empire will recognize human space as sovereign territory. A demilitarized zone will separate our regions. Trade will be permitted under regulated conditions. High Commander Zarth leaned forward. These terms are unusually generous. You demand no reparations, no territorial concessions. We want peace, not conquest, Walker replied. Humans have enough history of war to know that excessive demands only plant seeds for future conflicts. The Imperial leaders exchanged confused glances. After their devastating defeat, they had expected human warships to occupy their worlds, for harsh terms to be imposed upon their people. Instead, the humans sought only recognition and respectful distance. I don't understand, Emperor Krell finally said. You destroyed our fleets. You could demand anything. Dr. Lisa Reed stepped forward from the human delegation. Your Majesty, humanity's history of warfare has taught us that victory is not about destroying an enemy, but about achieving security. We don't want imperial territories or resources. We want to ensure our people can live without threat. Reed activated a different display, showing historical peace treaties from Earth's past. Throughout our history, we learned that lasting peace comes not from humiliation but from mutual respect. The Treaty of Westphalia, the Antarctic Treaty, the Mars Accords, each established principles that prevented future wars. Elder Drav studied the documents with fascination. Your species fought itself so often that you developed an entire science around ending conflicts. Exactly, Reed nodded. War is terrible, but it taught us valuable lessons. The Empire never learned these lessons because you never needed to, until now. Emperor Krill stood, his ceremonial armor catching the light. The Empire agrees to these terms, he announced. But I must ask, why did you warn us? At our first encounter, your Captain Walker told us to run. Why give an enemy advance notice? Walker stepped forward. Because we hope to avoid this conflict entirely. Humans don't seek war. We're just very good at it when forced into it. After the formal signing ceremony, Walker and Emperor Krell walked alone in the palace gardens. The two leaders, so different in appearance, but now bound by shared experience, spoke not as enemies but as representatives of powers that had tested each other's mettle. My advisors still cannot comprehend how your forces defeated our superior numbers, Krell admitted. Walker smiled slightly. Numbers alone never win wars, Emperor. Will, adaptability, and experience do. Your forces fought with precision but lacked creativity. They followed protocols while our commanders improvised. And now, Krell asked. "What happens between our civilizations?" "We learn from each other," Walker replied. "The Empire has much to teach humanity about unity and stability. Perhaps we have things to teach you as well." "Such as?" "How to be ready," Walker said, "for the day when something worse than humans comes along." As news of the peace treaty spread throughout the galaxy, many species marveled at the outcome. The invincible Empire had been defeated, yet remained largely intact. The humans, capable of destruction on an unprecedented scale, had chosen restraint. In the years that followed, human military advisors were quietly invited to Imperial worlds. Not as conquerors, but as teachers. The Empire began to adapt, to learn the lessons of warfare from the species that had mastered it. And throughout the galaxy, a new understanding spread. When meeting humans for the first time, remember their warning. When they tell you to run, perhaps you should listen. For a species that learned to fight before it learned to fly had earned its place among the stars not through conquest, but through the wisdom that only comes from understanding the true cost of war.